From the LaGuardia Airport redevelopment in New York to the new VA hospital in Omaha, Nebraska, public-private partnerships are keeping projects across the company moving forward. Joining us today is Mellissa Collar, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Rockford Construction in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and a national expert on public-private partnerships. Today we're going to talk about how P3 agreements, as they're known, are becoming more attractive options for universities. Mellissa, welcome.
I'm delighted to join you.
Can we start our conversation with a kind of a fundamental question about why you believe P3s are becoming more popular these days?
Absolutely. So, P3s are not new in the greater world that we live in. They were established years ago in Canada and Australia and Europe, but they had a very strict structure in those countries, and they continue to do today because they're governed by legislation. In the U.S., however, we don't have those constraints because we don't have federal legislation that suggests that we have to follow a certain protocol. Likewise, in the various states, some states have legislation, some don't. Some have legislation that addresses certain things. So where does that leave us? And it leaves us with the ability to be as creative as we can. And it allows us to really customize projects to the needs of the actual public sector party. And for example, a university. But it's not just in universities that we're using P3s. We're using them in transportation, we're using utilities and other infrastructure. We're using them in military housing. You mentioned the airport, VA, you already mentioned municipal redevelopment projects. It's really a problem-solving delivery model.
Let's talk a little bit more specifically about P3s that Rockford has been involved with, most specifically the Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Center at the Michigan State University. Mellissa, which party generally initiates the discussion about whether a P3 is the right way to go, and how does your company sort of prioritize those projects?
Sure. So there's really no hard and fast rule as to who brings to the forefront and starts that discussion on a P3. There are a lot of public sector, parties that will bring it to the forefront and say, hey, listen, I've heard about this delivery mechanism, tell me about it. In other cases, what we'll find, such as a university will say, okay, here's our long-range plans. We're trying to get a sense of what are these costs, how can we make this happen? And they're just looking for a little background information as they're putting their plans together. And a company like Rockford Construction will suggest, what about a P3? And the reason that they'll do that, for example, our company, is because of the creativity it brings to the table. So there may be a capital issue, there may be a risk discomfort, there might be a resource lack of resources is probably the best way. I don't have enough people to staff it. All the things that public parties, public universities are struggling with, and frankly, a lot of our higher education is struggling with. And so once we hear what the project is, then we have the ability to start to pull in our project partners. So for example, at Rockford, not only do we have a construction arm, but we have design, we have a property management company, we have a development company, we have equity sources, we are familiar with the incentives that are available, and we're able to really put those together. We can either do them internally, depending on the magnitude of it, or externally. So you take like a Michigan State University, Doug Meyer Medical Innovation Building. That required both the knowledge of how to put together a project that achieves all the goals of Michigan State University, but puts it in a package the private sector wants to partner and bring it to fruition. And so then it becomes a win-win for everyone that's involved, and frankly for the community.
What, in your estimation, are the keys to a successful P3? I mean, what makes these work, and what, conversely, might capsize them?
Exactly. That, and I think the most intimidating factor on the P3s is often the complexity of it. And there's this belief that it has to be this mega project. It has to be a highway, an airport, something like that for it to work. And so really the key are to sit down early and start that planning. and talking about what are the options. Vet it with the private sector, vet it with the public sector. Strategic plans are put together early, and if you bring in private partners early in that discussion, there's a lot that can be added and things can be done a little bit differently that can save time and money, which everybody wants to save.
Mm-hmm. Just to give our audience some context, the Doug Meyer project is 211,000 square feet. It's $85 million in terms of cost, 7 stories, and it's going to be completed by next October, October 2021. Right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
The other piece, you asked me what are successful keys. The other piece too is making sure that as we put these together and we're vetting this through, is we really have to incentivize each party's behavior contractually, so that everybody understands. You don't want to create the ambiguity. You want to make sure when we're putting this together, we talk about things like, okay, so what's the most important thing for the public party, partner? Is it schedule? Is it cost? Is it all? Is it just getting to a certain point? Where can they let some of the pieces go that lets the private party manage that issue? Let me give you an example. So if you absolutely got to get to a scheduled delivery date, we worked on a police station, it had to be relocated, there was a conference center going in. So it allowed us to acquire public property, to put together the project, to achieve what we'll call the key performance indicators. In other words, the performance standards. This is the state-of-art requirements that we have. We want this. We don't care how you get to it, but you have to have it done by this date. So in those scenarios, that means that if we need to shift our schedule, we need to shift workforces, if whatever might happen, that's on the private party, including things like force majeure. You have to account for these types of things. What are you going to do in those scenarios if it's an absolute? And then there's a little bit of a backing way, because the more that the public party wants to have some input in things, then the private sector is going to say, okay, no problem, but you have to give us a little bit of relief. And so it's kind of that discussion.
Kind of a balancing act.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which piece do you want and how important is it? And it's really a great education. And frankly, you don't see dispute resolution occurring very often in P3s because we did plan early, because we've had those conversations early that allows us to do that. And the P3 also is, do we have any preferred method of P3? Absolutely not. It's the customization. And, we were talking not too long ago about the Charles Darwin theory, but it's not the strongest of the species that survives. It's not the most intelligent, but it's the most responsive to change. And that's what the P3 does. But there are limitations. And that's what you asked about as well, right?
You're right, exactly.
Yeah. So what are limitations? Well, there could very well be situations where you've got a really, really difficult political climate that doesn't allow for that partnering in the traditional sense, because it is a partnering. There may be a situation where a shovel has to get in the ground. You don't have time for the planning. Or, frankly, there is a need for 100% control in every aspect. If the public partner really needs to maintain full control of everything, the P3 probably isn't the right delivery model.
My last question, Mellissa, is given the success that you've had so far with these arrangements, do you anticipate that your firm will be looking for future opportunities? And is the P3 world becoming more competitive these days?
That's a great question. So it's a definite yes. We are looking for those opportunities. We have one that we're excited, we believe, to announce in Detroit, in that market, in the near future. This is the changing world. I think it's going to continue to do great things in the world where we've got public partners that are really, look at what we're going through right now with our economics of our communities. The reality is they don't have the resources, but they have the need. So how do you formulate something that brings a community benefit in a way that really helps manage the resources of a governmental entity, a higher education partner, and the P3 gives us some of those options.
Mellissa, thanks for sharing your thoughts on this today. I wish you good luck with the projects going forward. This is John Caulfield from Building Design and Construction.